What's up, everybody? Welcome into Shout, a Buffalo football podcast. It's Wednesday night. The Staples Show is in your life as the Bills began preparations down at One Bills Drive for the Jacksonville Jaguars on the road divisional round or a wild card round playoff game this Sunday. Ryan and I are heading down to Jacksonville to cover this game. We cannot wait for that, but a lot to get to before we get there. And on the Staples Show, I want to talk about a couple of things. We kind of touched on it at the end of the show on Monday. You know, Joe Brady talking about his homework that he gave Josh Allen. Well, Josh Allen talked about it today and what maybe his self-scout revealed, and we're going to get into that and what we think about a couple things that are pertaining to that. I want to get to this Sean McDermott article that was published on The Athletic today. It's a really good read from their national feature story writer, Dan Pompei. He did a deep dive on McDermott. We'll get to that as well. We'll get into this injury report. A couple new things to talk about there as well. Ryan Talbot, how are you, buddy?
I'm doing great. And yeah, no shortage of things to talk about here with Wild Card Weekend right on the horizon.
Yeah, so I thought it was really interesting when Joe Brady gave a little bit of a inside look at Josh Allen's Week 18. And everybody knew he's probably going to only play a snap and then come out to extend his streak. Maybe he'd try to go for that touchdown, but whatever the case may be, it felt like he wasn't going to be in the game for very long. So instead of having him go and scout the Jets, 3-win team, like what's the point in that? Joe Brady got Josh Allen a bunch of cut-ups from his film from this season, something that players usually get when they're leaving One Bills Drive for the offseason to kind of correct some of the things that haven't gone well. The idea being like, all right, you go watch all of this tape that you would watch in the offseason of your season and see what that reveals to you. And Brady was really complimentary of Josh Allen, saying he was truthful, he was honest. And today, when we got a chance to talk to Josh Allen, he basically said, man, I was watching some of these plays and it was like, God, I stink. Like some of these plays were really bad. And we were talking so much over the last couple of weeks about how much blame does Josh Allen deserve in all of this. And I think what this tape mission really accomplished for him is maybe re-emphasizing how important it is to just take the throwaway, right? Like in situations where you want to make a play happen, it might be better to live another down than to either take a huge sack that sets you back and, limits how much of the playbook you can get into, but then also turnovers. This is a team in Jacksonville that is forcing turnovers at a very high rate, top 3 in the NFL. And in a game like this, that sugar high Josh Allen that kind of lives on the edge, you want to keep him limiting mistakes and getting him off that edge at times. And it's a balancing act, but I think this exercise for him going into this week against this defense, I think it was really a bright move by Joe Brady.
I love it. And if the Bills come out and win this game and Josh Allen plays lights out, maybe this is something the Bills should do every year toward the end of the season with the playoffs coming up, to let him self-assess before the winner go home games, because you and I have sat here and we've talked multiple weeks after games about how Josh Allen was Superman and carried them to victory. We've talked about how they lost the games and Allen made some really bad plays and a lot in the middle. So there's been a lot with Allen this year, but he took a career high in sacks, which a lot of them do fall on his shoulders because he was trying to do too much at times. More turnovers this year than last year. No throwaways, no drop, plays where he had opportunities to drop it down underneath and he, tried to do too much and it led to something bad happening. So to have those cut-ups in front of you going into a game where Jacksonville has some good D linemen. I know the sack numbers aren't outstanding in Jacksonville, but they have some really talented players up front. They have some nice players on the back end. Knowing that you're playing a really good defense, take the small wins. If it's 1st and 10 and you have to drop it off for a 3-yard gain, a 4-yard gain, take that, because then it's 2nd and 3rd and manageable, most likely, versus 2nd and 10, or making a really bad mistake that puts you behind the sticks or creates a turnover. So, I don't want Allen to sit there and become captain check down or anything like that, but I hope that this opens his eyes to the lost plays that he had and opportunities he had this season to really help himself and help this team. And it seems like the message came across because he said, this is playoff football. I need to make sure that we can score as many points as possible. And a lot of that is going to certainly fall on his shoulders.
He was asked if like this was more than just a physical rest over the last week. Could this been a good mental break too? And he said he thought so. Like my observation from being inside that building is it felt like across their entire roster there was this sense of rejuvenation in a lot of ways. I mean, this has been a banged up squad. I mean, if you think about on their defensive or on their offensive line, Connor McGovern's been playing through a couple different ailments. He's barely missed any snaps, if any, over the course of the season. He was able to kind of take a week off. Spencer Brown dealing with that shoulder injury. He said he felt great today. And on the practice field, they're going through the walkthrough. Spencer's like kind of chopping up with all the rest of the guys on the offensive line, and they're all amazed at how good they feel. And you saw Ian Rappaport's report a little bit earlier today that Josh Allen's foot is as close to 100% as it's been in quite some time. That's big news. And him getting a chance to not have to play last week probably got that thing closer to 100%. That to me is the biggest piece going in because listen, you might have to go blow for blow with the Jacksonville offense that's been amongst the NFL's best over the last couple of weeks. I mean, 8-game winning streak. They went on the road in Denver, kept things going at a really high level. Sean McDermott been very complimentary of what this offense has looked like with Jacoby Myers. So you might need the offense to go and perform and execute. And I went back and thought about that Philadelphia Eagles game, Ryan. And
Yeah.
I don't think it was a bad offensive performance. It was a bad execution performance,
Yeah.
right? There was opportunities in that game against a really good defense with a defensive line that scares you. It's the best in the league. But if you tell me on the other side of that, the Bills execute maybe 3 or 4 more times in that game, they probably score 25 to 30 points in that game. And that to me is what is possible this week against this defense. And you might need to score that many because it's a good offense on the other side.
I'm not going to sit here and say losing to the Eagles was a good thing, but in a way, after you lost to the Eagles, the division race was completely over. You knew there was not much to play for in week 18. And if the Bills come out firing on Sunday with Josh Allen close to 100%, the offensive line feeling really good, some of these other players that have had a few weeks off, some because of the injuries themselves leading up to week 18, and then maybe getting that additional week off last week, and they're out there making plays. Like Jordan Poyer is a great example if he's out there playing and after a few weeks off due to injury, then that was a blessing in disguise because essentially it became a bye week of sorts for key players on this Bills roster. Joey Bosa gets a little bit of rest. Deion Dawkins. Obviously, we didn't see Khalil Shakir play any snaps. He wasn't inactive, but good for Khalil Shakir, all that. So this could end up being a really good thing when it comes to Josh Allen and this Bills team.
If you're watching on YouTube right now, welcome into the show. Thank you for joining us on this Wednesday night. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel as well if you're new here. If you subscribe and hit that little bell, you will get a notification every time we go live so you can get the latest Bills news, Bills talk, Bills conversation right here on the Shout Bills podcast platform. Any final thoughts on Josh Allen in general, like observations of what he may have to do this weekend moving into this game against Jacksonville?
No, I don't think he has to play Superman. He has to protect the football. If he can do that, limit turnovers, or even just win the turnover battle. I know Jacksonville's won a few games this year where they've lost the turnover battle, but win the turnover battle, and that's going to put you in the spot that you want to be in. I don't think he needs to be Superman this weekend. He just needs to be smart with the ball.
All right, let's get to the next piece here. So the Sean McDermott story today, I would say that this was probably the deepest dive that McDermott's let somebody in a while, if not the entirety of his Bills tenure. I mean, his wife Jamie was quoted in the story. His children were mentioned in the story. Some real intel into what it's like behind the scenes. And we're talking about Josh Allen here. And I thought one of the most interesting lines in the entire story, and I wanted to get your read on it here, is when Pompey was writing about the relationship between Allen and McDermott and how it's developed over the years, and how at the beginning it was very much, teacher student kind of relationship. And it's kind of evolved into this, you know, this relationship built on respect where it almost feels like Josh Allen has a seat at the table in running this team.
Yeah.
They have a close relationship. Allen, spends time over at Sean's house, like some just details that when McDermott is asked about Josh Allen, it's very much kept at least in the press conference setting on a very basic level. Like, it doesn't
Mhm.
feel like he ever wants to let everybody in too much into the dynamic there. But there was one line in the story that I thought was interesting. It says, "The coach says he solicits his quarterback's opinions on everything from practice schedules to the team's mood to personnel usage." And I thought that was really interesting. In a year where Keon Coleman has been inactive, a healthy scratch several times, spinning the dial, if you will, in the receiver room quite a bit. I mean, it's interesting to think that Josh Allen might have a little bit of a say on who is playing this weekend at the wide receiver spot.
But doesn't that make a lot of sense? Because you're out there on the practice field with these guys. You're seeing who's going out there giving it all, who's going through the motions, maybe who's a little bit beat up and fighting through an injury. There's a lot there. When you have the reigning MVP, I think he has as good of a feel of the temperature of the room as anyone, including the head coach. So, yeah, I loved reading that. There's a lot of really good stuff in that article. When you said Josh Allen has a seat at the table, literally, he goes over for dinner sometimes to Sean McDermott's house and has a good relationship with the kids. And I love a quote from McDermott in the article that essentially said, I'm not here to be their friends, but I hope that someday when they're retired and holding their wife's hand or something like that, they can say that I'm really glad I played for Sean. And there's a lot of former players that clearly feel that way. Luke Kuechly and players from Carolina that have come over to Buffalo, players that have re-signed with the Bills multiple times. So, I loved a lot of the piece. McDermott being realistic about, I've done everything except for won the Super Bowl, and it kind of eats at him a little bit. And he wants it more for the fans than himself. So many layers in that. But when it came to the quote that you're talking about with Josh Allen, yeah, I love that. Put the trust in the guy that has really helped you sustain this long-term success in terms of the personnel usage, the mood of the room, everything, because Allen is beloved in that locker room. He's going to put you in a good spot week in and week out.
I want to play a little bit of a devil's advocate on this point, but you mentioned putting them in a good spot week in and week out. I want to put everybody listening in a great spot this weekend. If you are hosting a big time party for Bills versus Jags, get ready with Slider Sunday your way, King's Hawaiian at Tops. Every Sunday is an opportunity to enjoy delicious sliders made your way, and now you can win big while doing it. Vote for your favorite slider weekly for a chance to win a man cave makeover. Grab your favorite King's Hawaiian products from Tops and craft the ultimate sliders to make your Sunday even more special. Visit topsmarkets.com/slider Sunday. I, I push back because I have this theory, and it's just a theory, and we're just doing Bills talk here. I'm not reporting anything. I want to be clear with that. But I do have this theory that the look and feel of the Buffalo Bills offense has a lot more of a Josh Allen stamp of approval than I think people anticipate it would. And, we've talked about like his thought process around Keon Coleman and saying that he watched a lot of receivers that year and he's somebody that, they wanted. The shift to the identity of this team and how Joe Brady calls this offense. Like, these are all things that Josh Allen gives his sign off on. If you think about it, since Brian Dable left, they hired Ken Dorsey to be the offensive coordinator, who was Josh Allen's quarterbacks coach. And then when Dorsey was removed, the guy that got propped up was Joe Brady, who was also in the role and had very much built a close relationship with Josh. And I think that there is something organizationally that if things go off the rails this postseason and things don't go the way that they want, sure, there's going to be probably if they lose this weekend, there's going to be conversations around Sean. There'll be conversations around Brandon Beane, especially in the media side of things and fans and talk radio and all that kind of stuff. But I also think that, Josh Allen is an elite, great quarterback. You definitely want him to feel like he's part of the decision-making process. But I do think that at times that could work as a detriment to what you're trying to build. You have people that are in place to evaluate talent and bring players in. And I mean, Brandon Beane did a pretty good job of that in 2022 or 2020 when he traded for Stephon Diggs. And I think with the way that things have transpired on this offense, I think getting to the heart or the root of why it feels like for years they talked about over and over again not wanting to lose their fastball in the passing game.
Yeah.
And now it's felt like at times with how hard it's been in the passing game, it's been lost. It feels like, it's a Randy Johnson 100-mile-per-hour fastball that now you're trying to throw at 94, and some teams are hitting it out of the yard.
Yeah, and that's a fair pushback, and that's a valid criticism. And how much he has had a say in the drafting of players, signing of players in free agency, who knows? But when it comes to a week by week basis, I could see him having that input there. But the Bills have lost their fastball essentially this year. It has not looked easy in the passing game, and I don't know who the scapegoat will be for that at the end of the season. I mean, I think Joe Brady could end up being that person, right or wrong. And Allen did advocate for him at one point, like he did for Ken Dorsey. There were reports that if Dorsey had left with Dable, that Allen would have been very upset, from my recollection. So he's certainly had his hands in certain areas in terms of, hey, I would like you to go and get this player. Keon Coleman, I'd like you to draft this player. I just don't know if that's like something where Brandon Beane or Sean McDermott sign off on it right there and then, just because he said that. I'm sure they try to make their star quarterback happy as often as they can, but you're right. Something does have to give here. I can't sit here and say that the Bills have just been holding back all season long and they're going to come out here and the fastball is going to return. It has been more of a 92, 94 mile an hour, or maybe just kind of relying on your secondary stuff, your curveball and your slider. And the fastball just hasn't been there this season.
It's set up to be, though. It's set up to, I don't want to say full fastball, but when you think about when this offense has been really clicking in the passing game this season, I think Dalton Kincaid has been a big piece of that. He looked pretty healthy in the 10 snaps he played last week, even though I probably would have held him back. He did look good while he was out there. I know it was against the Jets and basically like a practice squad team, and that's aside from the point. The advanced analytics on Dalton Kincaid when he's been in the lineup are staggering. I mean, He finished as the number one tight end in the NFL in terms of passer rating when targeted this season. He means a lot to what they want to do on offense, so much so that Sean McDermott even mentioned it when asked about Kincaid this week. It's like you look at the stats, and it's no secret what he means to the passing game. So having him back, that's a huge key component. And then I think it's about Sean talking about spinning the dial, right? I do think that they've arrived on what puts them in a position to have the best possible passing game. And that is Brandon Cooks on the field, Gabe Davis or Tyrell Shavers in that secondary role, Khalil Shakir in the slot. And then what I think is going to end up happening is Keon Coleman being active over Josh Palmer this week. And it sets up with him appearing on the injury report today, the ankle injury that he has been dealing with throughout the season. He played 63 snaps on Sunday, Ryan, against the Jets in that meaningless game. He pops up as a did not practice today on Wednesday and with that ankle injury. So maybe they're just making the realization that he's tried multiple times to come back from this injury. It's been nagging. It's been consistent. And maybe Keon Coleman has done enough to earn a little bit of an opportunity back with how he's handled the benching and being late to meetings. Maybe the attitude has been better. Maybe the performance and being on time to everything has been better. This might seem like the perfect opportunity to maybe like get Keon Coleman into a couple of scenarios in this game. You don't have to ask him to play a lot. Shavers and Davis are going to handle that role. But I think you could throw him out there on third downs or on some different type of situations and try to get him going.
Yeah, and maybe nothing has changed I'm not saying like being late. He hasn't been late for anything. He hasn't been punished or anything like that. But maybe nothing has changed in terms of on the field. But because of an injury potentially to Josh Palmer, he might get that opportunity. It's going to be up to him to show that he can take advantage of that at this point in his career. Still a very young player. He will have a reduced role if he is active in this game, as you pointed out, but this is a golden opportunity that may not have been here if it wasn't for this ankle injury that, Joshua Palmer's been dealing with all year, that maybe he re-aggravated against the Jets or something this week. Whether Sean forgot to mention it or not, it wasn't mentioned before today's injury report came out. The Jets game could have had more casualties than we expected because Jordan Phillips goes on the IR today after he returned and played in that game. Now you have Palmer not practicing. The Bills with their injuries, it continues to be an issue for them, but it's going to open the door for some players to really step up. We've talked about the defensive tackle position in the case of, Phillips now obviously being on the IR, being out of the picture. Guys have already stepped up at that position. Who's going to make the most of maybe these additional reps? And then at wide receiver, if Palmer can't go, can Keon Coleman do anything with whatever reps are given to him?
What are you doing this weekend? Anything big?
A little trip to Jacksonville on the horizon.
Little trip. What are we doing? We're flying down to Orlando. Got a good deal on a flight down to Orlando.
That's right.
2-hour drive to Jacksonville. No big deal. I'm just hanging with my bro. Like, I thought that is actually going to be an uptick in excitement that we get to do a flight down to Orlando and then a road trip to Jacksonville. And we might even stop over at Epcot. Like, why not?
I'm all for it. I've never done the Guardians of the Galaxy ride. I've heard it hyped up. I love the movies. So fingers crossed that it works out. I'd be a big fan of it. I've already got a list from my daughter of things that she wouldn't mind as a souvenir if we do go there. So, all the bases are covered in the event that we go there on our journey this weekend.
I love Guardians. I don't want to give too much away, but I will say at the start, now I can't give this away because this will be a big thing, but it feels like when you get up to top speed and you're on that kind of railway there, you are flying. And if you're doing any travel during January or beyond, you're going to want to get over to Amtrak.com because they always are flying, getting you to your destination. No middle seats ever. Generous luggage policy. You arrive in comfort with free Wi-Fi and kids ride 50% off all the time. Got a small dog or cat? Fluffy or Fido can travel with you on Amtrak. Some restrictions apply, but head over to Amtrak.com to get more details.
Great transition. Yeah, if we were able to, I think Amtrakking to Jacksonville would have been an option. I just don't think it worked out time-wise.
It wouldn't work out time-wise. We'd probably have to leave sometime Thursday or Friday to get there. That's probably a long ride. You know what?
A spacious ride.
It will be spacious and be fun. All right. Let's get into the rest of this injury report. Well, let's get into this first because I've got a lot of questions about with Palmer going through more injury issues. Curtis Samuel's name has been brought up again. And to me, how I've kind of approached the Curtis Samuel story in December is he's on IR until in case bleep happens. Right? Like that to me is how I'm approaching Curtis Samuel. I don't know if that injury is season ending outside of asking Sean McDermott a couple weeks ago when he said it kind of still didn't know. They didn't think it was season ending, but they didn't really know. So he's kind of on the back burner. They have their group that I think that they like right now, especially that top four that we mentioned. But if there's another injury or two, Josh Palmer is going to be out of the equation. Adding back a Curtis Samuel into the mix wouldn't be the worst idea. I'm not closing the door on it. It's just not going to happen this week because they'd have to open his practice window. That hasn't happened. There was a practice window open. We'll get to that in a minute. But I think the earliest we would see Samuel is next week, and I'm not holding my breath.
Yeah, I feel like Curtis Samuel is like the secret episode of Stranger Things that people are clamoring for. It's not happening. It's just not happening. So I if there were more optimistic updates on him in the last few weeks, maybe I would say, okay, next week if the Bills win, there's a chance, or championship game. It's just we've heard nothing about him. It's I don't want to say odd, but I just think that maybe that door has closed. Maybe I'll be proven wrong.
Nice super sticker here from Pete Bonaker over on YouTube. Thanks for that, buddy. We really appreciate that. If you got a super chat, drop it in here. Pops up on our screen. We get it right into the episode and we start talking about whatever you want to talk about on this live episode of Shout. The practice window that's opening, and thank you for John in the comments here on Facebook, DeMar Hamlin. Practice window opens today. He's kind of been trending toward this over the last couple of weeks. I think it means something because I think on the surface, I'm not in a rush to I'm not in What are you texting me, bro? What are you
All right.
texting me?
This is a
I didn't see
legitimate
it.
question.
What did you say? What did you text me?
I'm not saying it. Sorry.
Oh,
Go back.
oh my God. Brutal. You were commenting on the
Ah.
avatar from the super chat, which I did not see before I threw it into so we like to be a family friendly show. I didn't get a zoomed in picture of that, so apologies if it was anything different. Anyway, people are listening to this right now on the audio side are like, what are these two dudes talking about? So the thing with DeMar Hamlin is I'm not in a rush to get anybody back in the mix. Coming off a pec injury, torn pec, you haven't played or practiced in well over 2 months. I'm always a little bit iffy about throwing that player back into the mix. But here's what the Bills are facing, right? You have Cole Bishop that's healthy. You have Jordan Poyer, who is dealing with a hamstring injury. You have Cam Lewis that left that game on Sunday with an ankle injury, something that he's kind of been dealing with a little bit. And then you have some unproven factors. I mean, Darnell Savage is a commodity in this league, but he hasn't had the best season. He's kind of getting onboarded here with the Bills. And then you have Jordan Hancock, who's a very young rookie who they just haven't shown a lot of faith in putting him in any kind of extended role at this point. So I think what getting Hamlin back on the practice field does for you is it gives you an option in case he can play special teams. You can kind of get him back into the mix in any number of different roles. It's very similar to what they're doing with Dane Jackson, bringing him up to the 53.
Yeah, I'm not expecting DeMar Hamlin if he can be activated by this weekend or if he's good to go to come in here and make some game-changing splash play, but he's depth. He knows the system. He's a solid player. Not a superstar. He's not in the caliber of Cole Bishop or Jordan Poyer, but he's always in the right position. He knows what he's supposed to be doing. There are some, the lack of athleticism, some bad angles at time to time, but there's a lot more good than bad when it comes to his game. And when you're looking for depth at that position, you can do a lot worse than DeMar Hamlin. So it would definitely be a benefit if you can have him on the field as a depth option at safety, have him out there on special teams come Sunday against Jacksonville.
Little announcement here. Tomorrow night, I will be live on the Mitch Morse podcast. I'm really excited for that. It's a double feature. I'll be on there with ESPN's Michael DeRocco with Mitch and KC. They do a great job on their podcast, which is Monday Mornings with Mitch. But we'll be doing it on a Thursday night, Ryan, and we'll be talking all things Bills Jaguars, and it's going to be a fun time. So definitely check that out, and you can find it if you search the Mitch Morse pod or Monday Mornings with Mitch over on YouTube.
Yeah, wrong day, but great podcast. So I'm sure it's going to be a great episode.
All right. Cole Bishop, speaking of the safeties, one thing that we didn't get to in that Sean McDermott article from The Athletic, there was a nice sneaky little tidbit on Cole Bishop. And Sean McDermott rolled his sleeves up a little bit with Bishop midway through the season, as we were, probably right in line with when the heat was kind of getting turned up on him a little bit, waiting for like a breakout to happen. And Sean McDermott didn't mince any words. He basically said, like, you cannot let a wide receiver come over the middle and not make him pay for it. I'm paraphrasing, of course. Next week, Bishop lays a massive hit on Houston, Texas receiver Nico Collins, which sends him out of the game for a little bit. And I thought that was worthwhile to notice that, and something that, especially at the safety position, McDermott's still, rolling up his sleeves and getting in there and coaching some of these guys up. And that's a pretty big step that we've seen from Cole Bishop in year 2, and they're going to need him desperately as early as this Sunday against Jacksonville.
Yeah, it was a great quote. Bishop really has turned, the light came on at some point this season, middle of the season, and maybe McDermott coming in there and saying, I need you to lay a hit on these guys. You can't let them come into the middle of the field and just go about their business. You got to make them pay for it. And he's been doing that. He's laid some massive hits on players this season, and his role has grown so much in terms of the trust factor, in terms of his knowledge, in terms of his instincts. And that comes with time. But I'm sure getting that kind of talk from your head coach too is that moment of realization where, okay, I really do need to get out there and make some plays, because they invested a lot in me, a second round pick. And right now, the results weren't great after a season and a half due to injuries, due to ineffective play. But he's really turned it on since then and has been one of their star players on defense.
Shaq Thompson on the injury report today, he was limited with a neck injury, which is something that he was dealing with a couple weeks ago that forced him to miss the game when Terrell Bernard returned before he went out again with a calf injury. DNP for Bernard, which is, I don't think he's going to be a part of the mix this week. Matt Milano didn't practice today, but that was just with an illness. So I would expect him be on the watch for him. It reminds me of Deion Dawkins, who played sick a couple weeks ago. It's something's been kind of going through the locker room a little bit. Let's get to the Matt Prater situation, because to me, this is one of the most interesting storylines of the week, because he didn't practice today. The plan is tomorrow on Thursday to let him go through a full kicking workout to see what he can do, where he's at. He said he feels really good. He said the reason that he didn't finish the game on Sunday is that his quad was tightening up on him near the later in the game, and he just didn't want to push it, which I probably think is a smart move at that point. The other issue with kicking in Buffalo this time of year is cold, right?
Yeah.
Can't be good on the muscles, keeping warm, staying loose. So that's one benefit that I think gives Prater a chance to kick this weekend, is it's going to be about 60 to 65 degrees on game day. I think it'll be a lot better for that quad. The Bills go out and they sign Matthew Wright, who get this, Ryan, he was on the Houston Texans 8 or so weeks ago when they beat the Jacksonville Jaguars in a 19-point fourth quarter comeback, and he hit every kick he attempted in that game. And he kicked in Jacksonville at one point time in his career. Now, he's kicked for, I think, 175.
This dude's kicked everywhere.
But not a bad addition. If Prater can't go, I kind of like the story around this Matthew Wright addition.
I think he's made 88% or more of his field goals in his career. I think it's like 60 of 68. Much higher on his extra point percentage. And he's a perfect 6 for 6 this year on field goals, 5 for 5 on extra points. So he's been solid this year. He's just been kind of that guy that gets called upon when your team has a short-term kicker injury and he doesn't hang around anywhere. So you could do a lot worse than Matthew Wright. But if Matt Prater can go, I'm all for it. He's been solid all season long. His game is good. No matter who kicks for Buffalo, if we're being honest, they're at a disadvantage versus Cam Little in Jacksonville. They could probably kick regularly from 68 yards out and feel confident in Little. That's just how good of a kicker he is and how big of a leg he is. Wright and Prater aren't going to be able to do that for you in this matchup, but I do like Prater's overall consistency this season. And if the quad isn't acting up, go with what brought you there. But man, make sure you are 100% sure that this isn't something that's going to linger or flare up again in game, because if Prater plays, I can't imagine the Bills using one of their practice squad elevations on Wright as an insurance policy. They're only going to have one kicker on this roster, and they got to make sure that whoever it is can finish the game.
The thing with Prater that's so interesting, he's been really reliable. He's 18 for 20 this season on field goals with the Bills, 90% clip. But the 3 missed field goal or extra points, I think, are worth mentioning, because if you go back over the course of his last 4 seasons combined, he only has 4 missed extra points in somewhere around 90 extra point attempts. So the extra point misses this season have been something that, I don't know, I'm just looking at his stats here, and I'm a little alarmed by that. And if you go back and you look at Wright, obviously not the same sample size. I'm looking here, Ryan. He has only missed 2 extra point attempts in his entire career. He's 45 out of 47 on extra points. And in a close game on the road, I want to feel good about sending my kicker out there to kick extra points.
I mean, at home or away, you want your kicker to be able to convert extra points, which is why I was baffled that Michael Badgley at one point was the choice for this Bills team. He missed some pretty big kicks earlier this year. He's missed some extra points before that, and he was the one that was brought in, and lo and behold, missed one against Cleveland, has one blocked against Philadelphia. You're right. You want someone that can convert on those, and Wright has a good history of doing so. I know Prater's had a few misses this year, but he's been a lot more consistent, obviously, than Badgley, too. It'll be one of the more fairly interesting decisions that the Bills have to make this week.
All right, so we got a super chat here. I'm pretty sure for my nephew, Sean Green. So we got to get that up on the screen. But John Blue with a funny joke. If wanting Matthew Prater is wrong, I don't want to be Matthew Wright.
I loved it. I gave it a little star. Good dad joke.
Stuff. All right, here's the super chat from Shawnee. How much pressure do you think is on each of these teams going into the playoffs after the seasons that they've had? Go Bills. That's a great question. Like, if you really think about it, who holds more pressure this Sunday when it comes to the Jags and the Bills? Because I think there's an easy argument to be made with the history that the Bills have had in the playoffs that there's so much on the line with Patrick Mahomes out and Lamar Jackson. That storyline has been played up this week already ad nauseum. But I do think that a loss in the first round this season with Josh Allen, at 29 years old, and you're coming off from an AFC title appearance last season in that game, it would be a regression of a year. You also didn't win the AFC East for the first time in 6 seasons. So I feel like there's definitely an amount of pressure. I also think there's a little bit of pressure under the surface on a Jags team to prove that everything that you've done in the regular season is real and it exists.
Right.
And Trevor Lawrence can enter this stage and deliver the way that he's delivered over the last 8 games. And it's going to be hard. And it's really hard when you're on an 8-game win streak and to keeping that going week after week. And now you're playing up against a season playoff contender. It's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah, win streaks are meant to be broken at some point, and that's why I think back to Buffalo defeating New England and the Patriots saying, "Hey, maybe this loss is a good thing for us. It's it's a reset. It's a tempering of expectations. We have to kind of realize that a team like the Bills can come in and beat us. And if you're Jacksonville, you're riding high on a 8-game win streak, but you're one slip up away from all of this ending. And they've had some really impressive wins. That win against Denver, I was blown away with how efficient they were on offense, how they really put Denver away in that game. They had a really good game against the Rams earlier this season. I don't think that they were with all their stars in that game, but they've had some impressive wins. But, man, they've also played the Titans a few times, the Colts without there's a lot of their starters. So, it's going to be fascinating. Buffalo has their fair share of pressure as well because of the national narrative of these other quarterbacks are out. It's Josh Allen's time to shine. The Bills have made it to the championship a few years. I've seen some people saying that this Bills team is going to go all the way in the AFC. But Jacksonville should start feeling a little bit of the heat and pressure as well right now. I've seen some national analysts picking Jacksonville to demolish the Bills this week. I saw TJ Hushmanzada was one of them recently.
What up?
Yeah. Pretty much say that they were going to just beat down the Bills this week, and he didn't want to say it because he loves Josh Allen. But I've seen a few of those pieces where Buffalo has no chance. So, I hope Buffalo is using that. If they're a team that maybe needs that motivation, they shouldn't. I don't think they do. But if Liam Cohen is using Vegas for motivation, being a 1.5 point underdog, I'm all for the other team, in that case being the Bills, using whatever they have to as well. For a little bit of extra motivation if needed. But again, Buffalo's been there multiple times. I don't think they need that extra motivation.
Spencer Brown said something really important to me today, and it was my biggest takeaway. And I might have mentioned it earlier in the podcast, but I'm really tired, and maybe I'm repeating myself. Tell me if I am. He said in his brief scrum after practice that he was standing around at walkthrough with the rest of the offensive line, and they basically looked around at each other and said, "Man, this feels weird. We all feel good. Our bodies all feel good." And to me, that is the most important part of this entire lead up to this game, is what last week allowed the Bills to do, because the Jags, they still had to play last week, right? They had to try to secure the division with Houston kind of lingering. And so I think that's a real advantage to mentally reset. And it felt like Josh looked refreshed, like we mentioned. And Spencer talking about the offensive line. The offensive line is going to need to be if we're talking about position groups on both sides of the ball, to me, that offensive line group, it holds such a big piece of the pie in terms of the final result of this game in their collective hand. Because in the run game, being able to run against a good run defense and then being able to protect Josh Allen, there's a lot on their plate. And I think the vibes, the attitude that we saw out of them today, it's a good starting point for the week.
It is. It's a great starting point. If they're feeling good, they're feeling healthy, we know what they can do. and what they've done this year in terms of complete unit dominating at times, especially in run blocking, being very good in pass protection at times. If you have Josh Allen taking the easy throws and not scrambling and running around for his life, and they can open up holes for James Cook as well, this offense can put up a lot of points. It's we need to see it, though. We need to see the consistency across the board from the O-line, from Josh Allen, and they're more than capable of doing it. It's all about getting hot at the right time. And I know the Bills, they lose to the Eagles. It was a meaningless Week 18 game, but this is the time to get hot. And if you get hot this week and go on a roll against Jacksonville, who's to say that they can't go to Denver and beat them the following week? Or if, some other upsets occur, maybe you're going to Houston or Pittsburgh, the right situation unfolds, they can run the table easily in my mind, but it all starts this week. Get hot. And then, just like we saw a few years ago, they can make a run and a real serious run.
A couple more quick hitters before we get out of here. So the Bills signed Matthew Wright to their practice squad yesterday. We mentioned him today. He looked really good kicking after practice. So because we were doing media, Josh Allen scrum, and he was doing a full workout for Chris Tabor. Matt Prater was watching on, and he was making a lot of kicks. So he looked really comfortable. The Bills also signed Maddox Trujillo, however you want to pronounce his name, to a reserve future contract, which to me, Ryan, signals Tyler Bass is going to be on the hot seat this offseason. And I think they probably bring him back and let him compete for the job. We'll see. I haven't actually looked at the contract. I could bring that up while you're talking and figure out if the Bills can save some money by moving off of him this offseason. But either way, this is a guy you drafted, you developed, you like, but availability a big concern this year. And he's coming off of a year where there was a lot of question marks about him last year.
Right. Trujillo at least pushes him and gives him some legitimate competition. Comes, spring, comes summer, training camp, and to see if you can at least push him off of his spot. They liked him enough to sign him to that future reserve deal. And, who knows what's going to happen in these next few months. I think Prater at 41 is probably near the end of his career. I don't think the Bills want to keep investing in a kicker of that age, but maybe Matthew Wright makes the most of his opportunity, whether it's at practice and not getting out there in a real game. They could bring him in over the summer too as another option, another leg. He's 29 years old, still has a lot of good years left. So I think the Bills want to have legitimate competition for Tyler Bass. I think that they gave him a pretty sizable contract, and they haven't seen the returns that they were necessarily expecting, that next step in his ascension. He's hit some big ones since then. The 61-yarder last year against Miami to walk it off and win. But after missing essentially the entire season and dealing with it all the way back to training camp, you want to have someone there that can at least maybe get the seat warm and say that, this job is not just yours. You're going to have to earn it.
It is going to be a $2.9 million savings. So you'd add that in salary cap space. If you cut them this offseason, it would only come with about a $2 million dead cap hit that you'd have to carry over. And the other big piece is if you do a post-June 1st cut, you had almost $4 million in cap space. So if you wanted to sell me on Tyler Bass being a cut candidate this offseason, I would definitely pull up a chair and listen to that. One more thing real quick. The Bills placed Jordan Phillips on season-ending injured reserve. He injured his foot in the Jets game on Sunday, and the Bills' depth at defensive tackle takes a little bit of a hit and obviously puts a little bit more on the plate of these two rookie defensive tackles. The question marks around Daquan Jones, who was limited today with the calf injury, but now you have Phillips unavailable. You're really going to be leaning on guys that, you weren't really thinking that you would be factoring into the things this time of year. Fedarian Mathis at the beginning of the season wasn't even in the mix yet. Larry Ogunjobi, obviously suspended for the first 6 games, thought you'd probably have a better season out of him. It hasn't necessarily lived up, but the opportunity there is now very big for him to step up. But I'm looking at this defensive line group, and Daquan Jones hasn't been great. And so if he's still dealing with this calf, if he's not 100%, you got a real decision to make. And if he gets held down this weekend, no Jordan Phillips, who I think you could at least say when he's been on the field and healthy, he's looked pretty formidable for this Bills defense. Now you're relying on a bunch of guys that weren't even on this defensive line in the playoffs last year, which Maybe that's not a good thing. I don't
Yeah,
know.
maybe that's not a bad thing, and it's fascinating though because we've sat here recently, maybe it was on Monday's show, talking about how impressed we have been with Fedarian Mathis and how good of a season Deion Walker has had. We finally saw Larry Ogunjobi pop a little bit last week, make a few plays, and he had a good second half against, I think it was the New England game off the top of my head. He's had his moments. So you have four guys right now going into this game that I think the Bills are fairly high on or feel like are decent enough to get you through the game, but you might get Jones back in this matchup. You can go to the practice squad and see what your options are there. They have guys, but losing Phillips hurts because when he has been on the field, he has made his fair share of plays in a limited role.
All right. I think that's going to do it for this one. I like where your head's at. Somebody said elevating Zion Logue. I don't necessarily think that's going to be in play. I think Mathis has played better this last stretch than we've ever seen from Logue in his couple of different call-ups that we've seen. And the guy I think that they have to get up off the practice squad is Andre Jones Jr. So I think that honk honk. I hear a train in the background.
It is. It's been a while. It's been a long while.
The train knows
night
that
train.
we're in part brought to you by Amtrak. Head over to Amtrak.com and get all the details. All right, this weekend is going to be a big one. We'll have you covered wall to wall with coverage, podcast, stories over at the website, Syracuse.com. Follow us on social media. If you're in Western New York on Friday night, 7 o'clock, 4600 Genesee Street, the Wingnuts Buffalo location at the airport, right connected next to the Buffalo Airport Hotel. Come hang with us. We'll do a live episode of Shout, preview Bills versus Jags. We'll eat great wings. We'll have great times. It's going to be a wonderful night, Ryan.
Cannot wait. Join us there as we preview this game before we head out to Jacksonville.
All right, everybody. Have a great night.